In this video lesson, we're going to be looking at the Magic Eye script of the Beauty Retouch panel, and we're going to look at how you can quickly and effortlessly clean up the whites of the eyes, add light and life into the eyes, and even change the color of the iris or makeup if you'd like to. Before getting started on all that, I'm just going to do a quick cleanup of the distracting elements in this image. So if we zoom in here, you can see I'm finding this eyelash here distracting, this line, and this top eyelash. We just want to get a blank pixel there, and I'm going to quickly clone away this top eyelash, and I'm going to get the healing brush tool and remove that last bit, and then go down to the bottom and just carefully clone that out as well. Obviously being very careful here when it meets the whites of the eye. Great, and then get the healing brush tool for this line. Perfect. Maybe we can clean this line up as well. There we go. So I'm going to label this layer RT for retouch, and then I'm going to run the Magic Eyes script. I'm going to open this group and I'm going to start working from the bottom up. And so I'm going to start in the clean eye whites group here, and I'm just going to show you what each layer does in this group. So I'm going to press Command I to invert it and just go through each individual layer. So we've got this removing blood vessels there, and as you can see as I toggle it on and off, it does quite a good job of removing the veins or blood vessels in the eye, especially the smaller, thinner ones get dealt with quite well. What I will say is that if your image doesn't have any blood vessels in the eyes that you're particularly worried about, then you can delete this layer as it will add to the file size of your image. Then we've got the channel mixer there, and this will brighten the whites of the eye, but it does brighten them quite a bit, so you might need to change the opacity of the layer. Then lastly, we've got the hue and saturation layer, and this will take out the color in the whites of the eye. You just need to be aware that you don't want to take too much color out of the eye. You want it to have a little bit of natural color in there, so you might want to lower the opacity of this layer or even brush the effect out in areas of the layer mask. So I'm just going to press Command I to invert this group. I'm going to get my brush tool and I'm going to put it onto a medium flow of about between 20 and 40%. And I'm going to paint on white on the mask, just being careful not to paint the skin or the iris, and just to affect the whites of the eye. And obviously this effect is too strong at the moment. You don't want to have it quite as strong as this, but we are going to adjust it that it looks more natural. Great. And then I'm going to go into the group and I'm going to get the channel mixer there, and I'm going to take it down maybe to 14%, just so it's having a slight effect there. And I'm going to get the hue saturation there and ever so slightly take it down as well, maybe to 84%. And I'm actually going to get the flow of my brush, take that down to maybe 10% or 11%. And I'm going to make my brush black by pressing X. And I'm just going to take out some of that effect in the corners of the eyes, just to bring some of that realism back. You don't want to have the eyes looking a little bit too white there. So something like that. And I think I'm going to leave that there. Then the next layer is this add light layer, and it does exactly that. It lightens the areas of the eye that you paint on this layer with. All you need to do is paint with a white brush on the actual layer itself, and everywhere you paint will lighten or will become lighter. And you can use this to take out any dark spots within the whites of the eye, or you can use it to enhance and brighten the iris itself. And I'm going to start off by taking the flow of my brush down to very low, about 2%. I'm just going to very gently brush over some of the darker spots in the white of the eye. You want to be careful not to change the shape too much, but we'll make sure that we're not doing that when we take a look at what the overall effect of this has been. And I think something like that is good. I'm actually just noticing that there's this tiny little bit of the vein over there. So I'm going to go back to the clean eye whites group, and I'm just going to zoom in there, and I'm going to just make sure that we have that area properly painted in. That's why it's good to zoom in and out and just get different perspectives as you work. And then going back to the lightening layer. Sometimes when you clean the whites of the eye, you can lose a little bit of shape. And if you want to bring some volume back to the eye, what you can do is lower this flow back down to 2%. You can just create or paint a horizontal line across the middle of the eye. So something like this, and just quite carefully and subtly paint that in. And you can see that brings back some volume to the eye. I then want to enhance the actual iris of the eye. I'm going to do that by just painting in quite small lines out from the pupil to the edge of the iris. and just mimicking the actual pattern of the iris itself. If we take a look, I think that's doing a nice job there. Then I might actually lower the opacity of this layer just ever so slightly to about there. Then we can move on to the darken layer. And this is almost the exact opposite. We're just going to be painting with black on the layer to darken areas of the eye. And the first thing I'm going to do is darken the outer ring of the iris to add some contrast to the eye. So I'm just going to keep the flow of my brush really low, and I'm going to paint around that ring there. And that'll just define the eye and give it some pop and contrast. Then I'm also going to just brush in the base of the eyelashes and make those darker, and just a little bit less on the lower lid as well. Just a subtle effect. You don't want to go too far. And I'm also going to just add some shape back into the corners of the eye. Brush this gently into the corners here, just to make sure that we're not losing any shape there. And I'm going to run the brush along the upper lid as well, where the eyelashes might be making a bit of a shadow. And I can see that this effect is a bit too strong, so I'm going to lower the opacity of this layer until it's just having a subtle. And I think something like that is good. If you wanted to, you could also use this layer to darken the eyebrows, but I don't think we need to in this image. So I'm just going to keep it at something like that. Then this next layer, you might not use it very often, but if you did want to change the color of the iris, what you can do is you can take your brush and make sure you've got it on 100%, and you're going to paint to reveal this effect, and just be careful not to paint over the whites of the eye or the pupil of the eye. And again, this obviously looks too strong, but we're going to adjust it to something a little bit more realistic. Just finish this up. Then if I go into the actual hue saturation layer in properties, and I move the slider to the left or the right, the hue slider, you can see the color will change to what you want it to be. I'm going to change it to a similar color to what we started off with, which was a blue, but less cyan than that, maybe something like that. And I'm going to lower the saturation of this layer quite a lot. And I think that looks okay. And if you wanted to change the makeup using this layer as well, you could do the same thing, just brush it in over the makeup. Although I would brush it in at a lower opacity and just change the opacity of the layer itself once you've done that. So let's just delete this because we're not going to be using it. And let's take a look at what we've done. I'm going to zoom out a little bit and just make sure that the shape's not changing. I think it might be changing too much in the right corner over here. So I'm going to go back, and I think it would be this layer that's doing it. And yes, it is. I'm going to get the black brush, lower the flow, and just brush that out there to something like that. And let's take a look if that's enhanced the shape there. And I think that's looking good. If you wanted to save some file space, what you could do is you could get your lasso tool and you could just make a selection of the areas you've affected with this group. You can press Command-Shift-C, Command-Shift-V to copy paste, and then you can actually delete the group and save yourself some file size there. And I'm just going to label this Magic Eyes. And then if we take a look at what we've done from the start, you can see that you can use the Magic Eye script to whiten the whites of the eyes and enhance and brighten the eye in general.